Afternoon, I'm Marisa Vader with the latest from the federal corruption trial of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, also charged his longtime confidant and lobbyist Michael McLean. I want to bring you into our process here as we get news from the courtroom. We're hearing there's yet another question from the jury. What you're looking at right now is a living document. There are not cameras in that courtroom, so we have a producer reporting the information that's being discussed right now between the judge and also attorneys for both sides of this case. We want to walk you through what's happening right now. We learned a little bit before noon that there was some kind of note, a conversation that the jury had sent to the judge and to attorneys asking for more information. And we've learned that the jury was asking for additional copies of the jury instructions as well as some binders of transcripts of the many conversations that happened during this 11-week-long trial, 11 weeks of testimony rather. Then the jury's had this for the last 8 days. We're on our 8th day of deliberation. There was a specific note about what the jury wanted more information on, and that is about salaries as well as wages paid, specifically a bona fide salary. At issue here, Madigan is facing charges related to running a criminal enterprise. There's accusations of no-show jobs. They're alleging that McLean played a role in making all of that happen. This bona fide salary may be tied to that. We're going to double check that in just a minute. At this point, prosecutors are talking about whether or not they should shorten the jury instructions. It sounds like that's going to be up to the judge. We're hearing, though, from the defense that they would object to changing any of the instructions that the jury has about how they're supposed to make this decision. They want things to stand as is. And as you'll see, that's just scrolling right here on your screen. I'm scrolling right along with you. Prosecutors saying that this exemption, this issue of the bona fide salary, that is part of a statute that does not apply to any other count than the issue of bribery. I know this is a lot of legalese, and if you haven't been watching the case that closely, we want to help you wade through it. And to do that, I want to bring in our legal expert, Irv Miller, who has been watching this. Irv, I know you've also been looking at this document, so you're up to speed. I want to start very generally. It seems that this issue of bona fide salary is the sticking point for the jury here right now. Can you explain to us how that factors into this trial and the role it plays?
You know, that's one of the areas of contention in the case, whether or not the payments to these gentlemen from ComEd and to AT&T were legitimate payments, or they were in furtherance of trying to coerce Michael Madigan to, be in favor of legislation because of getting these jobs for these people that apparently they either did work at or didn't work at. So it's one of the major portions of the evidence in this case that the jury's having trouble with.
Right, because at issue here is AT&T or ComEd related to allegedly these no-show jobs that they're saying would have benefited Mike Madigan and McLean. The issue of changing jury instructions, is it rare that we might see that or this clarification happen on the 8th day of deliberations in a case as big as this one?
You know, in all my years as a prosecutor and as a criminal defense attorney, doing this for a long time, I've never seen that happen. What you don't want to do is have a technicality like this end up going to the appellate court and having the case reversed because they made a mistake in trying to reissue jury instructions. That's why the government is saying they don't want to do it. They want a clean record. They don't want to leave another potential issue up for the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals if there's a conviction in this case.
Sure. At this point, Irv, I know you know this too, we are also waiting to get a resolution on this issue. Then it's possible Madigan and McLean might leave the courthouse because they are there to hear how this issue plays out. I'm not seeing much more from our notes. I'm sure the discussion is happening right now, but Irv, if you could sort of role play from both sides what you think they're arguing about right now as far as this definition of bona fide salary and the role it's going to play as these jurors weigh this decision.
Well, there's multiple issues with this note, and one of the issues is they want to have more evidence brought back to the jury room. They're asking for all the written stipulations, and there's a lot of written stipulations. They want 2 binders of probably the wiretap material to go back that they don't have. So the FBI agent had to run and grab the binders to have those go back to the jury. The bottom line to this is we are not even close to a verdict in this case. This jury wants to take a look at a lot of evidence to try to help one side try to convince the other side as to whether or not it should be a not guilty or guilty or not guilty on individual counts, or Madigan versus McLean. There's a lot yet to be decided in this case, and I don't think we're even days away from getting a verdict in this case. The other thing is, at this point in time, they may be having trouble agreeing on anything or even small issues. And frankly, a lot of us thought here today that this note would be about, hey, Judge, we're hopelessly deadlocked, we can't reach a verdict. Well, that's not what came out. They want to continue deliberations, but they're requesting more information.
Right. If I can, Irv, I'm going to read you the latest updates from our producers in the overflow room watching this happen. I understand the judge is weighing whether or not to add a note for the jury that regular salary during the normal course of business is not something of value, but in the case of bribery, it might be. Can you walk me through that within the parameters of these allegations?
Wow, they're trying to recreate a scenario because the jury was originally instructed as to what is a legitimate payment for work and what is not legitimate. They've already received that instruction when the judge instructed them several days ago now. So I guess they're just trying to clarify it, and I assume that the defense is going to object to that because they don't want any changes in this on that particular issue, because that's a major issue that apparently if the jury is stuck on this issue, the defense doesn't want to help getting them unstuck. It is not to the defense advantage to have the jury come back with a guilty verdict. They would be happy to have a mistrial in this case and have the thing be tried all over again sometime in the future.
Right, there's some strategy there. And speaking of a mistrial, Irv, I spoke with you yesterday just as we waited for any word or additional notes or decision from this jury, and you mentioned that in the time frame we are in, this many days into deliberations, you were concerned that maybe we were getting to this point of a mistrial. I'm not saying we aren't, not saying we are, but how surprised were you to hear of a note today and it being of this caliber, the specifics, showing how deep into the weeds and the work this jury is?
Well, they're obviously working hard, so they have to be congratulated for that. They're not, they're not trying to get an easy out. They're taking this seriously. It's a very conscientious jury. They show up on time every day. They're given notes during the trial. They're paying attention, so they're taking it very seriously. But typically when the jury goes back to deliberate, all the evidence is supposed to go back to them at that particular time. They're not really supposed to be asking for more and more evidence as the day goes on during jury selection. So, what the defense is hoping for is anything but a guilty verdict. They would love a not guilty verdict. They would secondarily like a hung jury, which means they go home tonight and don't have to worry about the future.
Irv, just for people who may be watching this that aren't necessarily, again, big court watchers, we're waiting for the judge who will make a decision on this issue right now, correct, in the next few minutes, and then we'll know where the jury is going from here.
Now, it's my understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but when we first started this a half hour ago, Judge Blakely wasn't even here. There was a substitute judge that went into the courtroom. And I was just wondering, Maria, if you have any update on that as to whether or not he's back.
No,
because I'm asking that because usually a substitute judge doesn't want to make any substantive decisions on a case that he hasn't heard.
Sure, that makes a ton of sense. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Irv. I missed that and sharing that with our audience right off the bat. We did hear that Judge Blakely is out, and there is this replacement judge, and we're getting an update on that right now. If we can put our notes back on the screen, it does make sense, like you said, Irv, that maybe this judge who's just filling in temporarily doesn't necessarily want to get into a major decision like this. Our court watchers are writing right now that the judge says that they're going to recraft this proposed change and get in touch with Judge Blakey for his opinion on this. Irv, I guess, as you were just saying, that doesn't surprise you that that would be the decision from this judge who's in temporarily.
The bottom line, the way this works is there's always an emergency judge in this building, and that emergency judge can step in for any reason, even take a jury verdict, because he can't sit around and wait for a judge who's on vacation or took the day off. So, but what the emergency judge will do, he will consult the judge, Judge Blakely, to make the decision. They could get in touch with each other over the phone we won't know what they're saying to each other, but I'm sure the emergency judge will follow the instructions of Judge Blakely, because this is an issue. It's a substantive issue, it's a very important issue, and Judge Blakely doesn't want the emergency judge to do something that's going to end up messing up this case in the appellate court if there's a guilty verdict in the case.
Right. Irv, as we know it, court is over for now, so that wraps up the discussion there, assuming the jury is now on hold, but maybe going back to their deliberations, or what do you think would happen for both the jury and both sides now, really, as we wait, Irv, for an update on where their discussions should go next?
You know, I hate to make an absolute statement, but it doesn't sound like it's very likely that we're going to have a verdict today. So, you know, this courthouse right now, the first floor is full of media, and I think everybody is going to realize that nothing's going to happen today.
Right, and we will have our cameras trained to see if we can see Mike Madigan and Mike McLean on their way out of court, if that is what's happening next. Irv, with this change or with this decision, with the judge who's substituting, essentially, kicking this decision back to Judge Blakely, I want to know if you can look into your crystal ball, any idea of how long that could possibly take? We don't know why Judge Blakely's not there today. And also, could this ultimately be a chip played in the case for a mistrial?
You know, the fact that they've requested, the jury has requested so much after, I think we're in the 8th day of deliberation, if I'm not mistaken, that they've requested so much evidence means I would say they're not even close to coming up with a unanimous verdict on the entire case with both defendants. I think it sounds like, I hate to say it, probably halfway there. And frankly, jurors can deliberate for a couple weeks. That happened with Blagojevich. They were out for a really long time on his second trial. So the judge is going to let them take as long as they want. The only thing that's going to get the judge's attention, if there's a note that's sent to him, either that says, "Judge, we're deadlocked," or "Judge, we have a verdict." If one of those things happen, then we're close. But unless we have one of those two notes, which frankly we do not have, obviously, it's a flip of a coin as to how much longer this is going to go on for.
And this jury was getting information from more than 60 witnesses, again, 11 weeks of testimony, so much to go through, transcripts, etc. Now we're talking about the issue of bona fide salary. Does it surprise you, or like you said, maybe impress you, that they are being so thorough with this much information that has to be weighed?
It's a great question, and frankly, I think it would impress anybody that they're taking the time, trying to do what they would say is the right thing. It's great when a jury takes a case seriously. And frankly, in my experience, most juries do take their job seriously. They usually call themselves in the future by the name of the case. Hey, we're the Madigan jury, or back in the day, we were the Richard Speck jury, or the John Wayne Gacy jury. So they take their job seriously, which is great. But you know, there has to. I would say the government is probably more worried about things, because if they're asking for all this evidence, that means to the government, hey, listen, maybe they're not buying our theory of the case, and that's why the other group, which is probably saying, hey, listen, we don't know what our decision should be. People need to be convinced, and God knows how long that's going to take.
Irv, would you consider this one of the surprises of this trial, along with Madigan testifying for himself? Any other big highlights? Would you categorize that in a similar vein?
Well, I got to tell you that of all the legal know-it-alls, our whole universe of legal know-it-alls predicted there was no way that Madigan or McLean was going to testify in this case. And frankly, I still think that the right decision was not to put him on, because he was hurt badly in cross-examination by the government. So, but you know, you don't want to just, if you're a defendant, you don't want to just sit back and take the incoming shells without trying to respond to it. And he's the type of guy that he's not going to sit back and take it. So our theory was then, he's going to get up there, may not be even listening to his lawyer's advice. He wanted to testify. And you know, his testimony may have convinced some jurors, and that's maybe why they're still in there requesting evidence. So the people that are like, you know, the guilty jurors trying to convince the not guilty or the unsure jurors of what's going on, That's why they're bringing in more of this evidence to try to start convincing each other one way or the other.
Sure, it's entirely possible. I want to ask about a juror that we heard about yesterday, or I know some people knew about this earlier in the week, but they either are going to the Super Bowl or have some big Super Bowl plans. This was all the talk. And we heard that Judge Blakey at one point said that's not going to be an issue. That led some people to wonder if we would get a verdict today, if things would be wrapped up. Does not seem like that is an issue. But do you think, Irv, that information may have played a role in the jury's mind of we want to push through? And now it seems like no, they still have a lot more to go. They don't necessarily want to wrap up just so they can get to their Super Bowl party.
Well, there's a practical problem with the issue of the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl is, as everybody knows, is Sunday night. So that means this jury is going to be flying back to Chicago from New Orleans on Monday. Mm-hmm. Guess what? That means that there will not be anything going on with this jury probably on Monday, unless this guy is taking, a red eye and, comes in early Monday morning. But it'll be interesting to see what the emergency judge does as far as scheduling. He may say right away, listen, we're going to cancel Monday and just start again Tuesday, or let's take a shot on Monday. Maybe this guy will be back.
Mm-hmm. Do we think that the jury, at this point, is there any reason that they would be sequestered to finish out this deliberation?
No, not. I hate to say definite things, but that's not a possibility. Mm-hmm. This juror has been going home every night for months now, and the admonishment is don't talk to anybody. And so far, there's no violations. Mm-hmm. It's obviously a major press case. You can look around here today. It's a major press case.
Oh yeah, I know you're surrounded by cameras probably on both sides. Irv, my next question for you, as we wait to see if our cameras are going to catch a glimpse of Michael Madigan and Mike McLean leaving the courtroom and coming down there into the lobby on the first floor. When it comes to the issue of getting a note to Judge Blakey, who is out today, and again, we don't know why, so that colors possibly the time frame that we're talking about. Have we seen, Irv, a range of time when there's an issue with a temporary judge sending a note to the other? I'm curious if there is a time frame where it's possible we could hear something today. It's possible it might be Monday or Tuesday as far as a decision on the question about bona fide salary at play.
Well, the emergency judge will be here all day, and if necessary, he'll be here on Monday. I can't imagine Judge Blakey not being back on Monday at least. He probably had some personal reasons he had to do something today. But the emergency judge is quite capable of doing what I call ministerial acts on the case on its own. But if something is really substantive about the case, believe me that the emergency judge will defer to Judge Blakey over the telephone. So I don't think that's an issue.
Okay, great. Irv Miller, thank you so much for being with us to talk through the information we just heard from this jury note. We will wait for a decision from Judge Blakey when we get it. But in the meantime, stay with us here on CBS News Chicago.